Good evening, everyone. I'm Kate Duggan, president of the Foundation for San Mateo County Libraries, and I'm thrilled to be here tonight to introduce New York Times bestselling author Janelle Brown to discuss her new book, Pretty Things. This is such a treat for the libraries and for all of you joining us tonight. Janelle's no stranger to the San Mateo County Libraries. She grew up in the county and was a frequent visitor to the Atherton Library. Her father, Dick Brown, also serves on the San Mateo County Library's JPA governing board, so it's easy to see where her love of books came from. Pretty Things is Janelle's fourth book and has been described as part psychological thriller and part morality tale, and promises a thought-provoking, twisted plot that leaves readers surprised at the end. Here to take your questions and join the conversation with Janelle is Lisa Meltzer Penn, the immediate past president of the California Writers Group. We'll be taking selected audience questions at the end, so please make sure to submit your question in the YouTube chat. And don't forget, books and signed book plates are still available for purchase through the link below. Proceeds will go to support the Library Foundation and Florey's Bookstore in Pacifica. So without further ado, I'm excited to introduce Janelle and Lisa.
Hi.
Hello, everybody. Welcome, Janelle, and thank you, Kate, and the San Mateo County Library and Florey's Bookstore. My name is Lisa Meltzer Penn. I'm with the California Writers Club, and my video is not going, so let me get that started.
Sure,
okay, there I am. Hi, everybody. Now you can see me. Janelle, I'm very excited to be in conversation with you tonight. A local girl.
I know. I'm excited to be. This is feels like coming home for me.
It's really interesting how things are working these days. And later on, I'd like to kind of talk about this virtual world we're all finding ourselves in. But the really great thing is everybody could join us tonight. I have some friends in Southern California, my sister and her book group, and some friends on the East Coast who are joining us. And I was reading some of the blurbs from your book. I just wanted to read a couple of them to our audience for Pretty Things. And it's a winter of aspiration and desire, duplicity and revenge. There's shifting identities and the secrets we keep. And those just seem to really sum up what you can find in this book. We have a dual narrative. There's a spoiled rich girl and elite Instagram influencer, Vanessa, for people who have not read the book yet. And we have Nina, a con artist with a chip on her shoulder after growing up poor and socially outcast. And it's really interesting to see how these two women come together. And I had so much fun reading your book, Janelle. And I've already started reading Watch Me Disappear. I can't wait to continue with that. I also love lakes, so I was really digging your Lake Tahoe setting. And so you grew up on the Peninsula, and I know that you had spent a lot of time in Lake Tahoe also, and it really shows in your writing. I'm curious if you knew right away that you wanted to set this book in Lake Tahoe, if you came up with the characters first, or the plot first, or the setting, and just how that evolved.
Right. Well, I've always wanted to set a book on Lake Tahoe. I grew up in Atherton, and my family had a vacation home up there when I was growing up, and it's where my husband and I got married. And so I've spent lots and lots of time up there, and I've always thought it's just this kind of special place that's so evocative and has so much like texture to it. And so I've been kind of looking for the right book to set up there for some time. And when I came up with this idea about this con artist who targets an heiress and moves into her guest house, I immediately thought, oh yes, an estate on the shores of Lake Tahoe. And because there's so many fantastic old classic estates up there. The Airman Mansion, you have Vikings Home, and then all of the other ones that have been torn down or other side of the lake. And so I kind of used those as a jumping off point to imagine the estate of Stonehaven in the book. But yeah, I mean, I kind of I feel like they came almost simultaneously. The minute I thought heiress and estate, I immediately thought, oh, Tahoe, this is it. My Tahoe book.
So that it's no longer just a site of your wedding, but also this intricate plot.
Right, exactly.
So in a minute, I want to ask you to read your prologue from this book, because I think it's so beautiful how you write about the lake, and your love for this lake really comes through, and it drew me right in. But I was interested in how you carry that throughout the book, because we have the Vanessa character. She talks about her friends as shallow, and they're like the thin crust on a frozen lake, a barrier blocking the way to anything deeper. And she looks at this other woman, Nina, who also goes by the name Ashley, which you'll find out about when you read the book, as a buoy to cling to, one that might keep me from drowning. And there's a lot of this lake stuff that goes through. You're really good with that. And I wanted to just ask you to read the prologue, because it's so beautiful, and I think it will really set it up for people who have not yet had a chance to read the book.
Okay, sure, no problem.
Okay.
Here's the book. So yeah, the prologue is where it starts, obviously. When a body goes down in Lake Tahoe, they say, it does not rise again. The frigid temperature of the lake, its vast depths, conspire to keep bacteria at bay. What once was human fails to decompose. Instead, the body is doomed to drift along the lake bed in perpetual limbo, just more organic matter joining the mysterious menagerie that lives in Tahoe's uncharted depths. In death, there is no disparity. Lake Tahoe is over 1/4 mile deep and 2 million years old. Locals have laid claim to a fistful of superlatives. Their lake is one of the deepest in America, the purest, the bluest, the coldest, the oldest. No one really knows what's at the bottom of that water, but everyone is sure it's something dark and enigmatic. There are myths about a Loch Ness monster-like creature called Tahoe Tessie, which no one really takes seriously, even though Tessie sells a lot of t-shirts. But deep sea cameras have also captured mysterious fish on the lake bed, 1,600 feet down. Creatures pale white and shark-like, evolved to withstand the near freezing temperatures, their blood slowing to a crawl in their veins. Creatures perhaps as old as the lake itself. And then there are other stories about how the lake was used by the mafia as a dumping ground for its victims back when they controlled the Nevada casinos. Stories about the gold rush railroad barons who considered the lake a convenient mass grave for the Chinese migrant workers that they worked to death, building the tracks over the Sierras. Stories about vengeful wives, cops gone bad, killing trails that led to the lake's edge and then went cold. Kids tell each other bedtime stories about corpses bumping along the bottom of the lake, eyes open, hair floating in perpetual limbo. Above the surface of the lake, the snow is softly falling. Below, the body drifts slowly down, lifeless eyes lifted toward the vanishing light until it sinks into darkness and is gone. So that's the prologue.
Thank you. Wow. I realized as you were reading, Janelle, that I was describing this as a very beautiful opening. It's also very macabre. Which,
corpses, yes.
And this is suspense and thrill. I don't know if you call it suspense or thriller. It's kind of both, I guess.
I tend to call it more of a suspense. I think thrillers tend to be a little bit more like, action, and guns on every page. I call it kind of a suspense because it's a lot of it happens, but it's maybe a little bit more of a slow burn than some of your.
It is a slow burn, yeah. So I guess it's not really a spoiler to say that sometime in this book there's going to be a body in that lake.
Yes.
We kind of find that out right away.
So, yes.
Which leads me to plot. So I recently heard John Grisham in conversation with Elaine Petrocelli at Book Passage, and he said he always knows the ending of his books before he begins, and he can't get lost because he knows he has to get to that ending. Do you write that way? Do you always know where you're going, or do you get surprised as you're writing?
A little of both. I usually start with an idea of an ending that I'm working towards, and a loose idea, less about the specific mechanics of how the plot is going to end, as more of the emotional arc. So where are the characters going to end, and what needs to happen for them to complete the kind of emotional arc that I'm imagining. And I'll have like a general idea, but then as I write, the endings often become more clear to me. The story starts to reveal itself. I mean, it sounds very weird and hokey and mumbo jumbo to say, but it's true that as you start to write and the characters become more fully formed, they start taking actions that maybe you didn't anticipate. I feel like I don't like imposing action on characters. I don't like imposing a plot on a character. I'd rather let the character inform the plot. So that means that sometimes the stories start to go in directions I didn't really imagine at first when I started imagining the book. But I do, generally have a loose idea that I'm working towards. But I've had books like the ending of Watch Me Disappear, my last novel, changed radically, like 3 different times. So where I thought I was writing to at the beginning is nowhere near where I ended. But this one, I had a pretty good idea where I was going to end. I just didn't know the mechanics of how it was going to happen.
So did you know which body would be in that lake at the end?
I did.
Okay.
I knew that much.
Definitely, you can't tell at the beginning. And before I got to the end, I'm not going to give any spoilers, but at a certain point, I was trying to guess, how is this going to end? Like, who's going to come out on top? Because we have a book filled with con artists. So I wrote down a list of 20 possible endings. I was like, I wonder if I can guess it. And I don't read suspense all the time. I try to read at least one a year because it's just so much fun. And I got a couple pieces of it right, but not how it all came together. So it was just really fun. And it's like, I don't know how you do that. Like, how do you figure out what it's going to be so the reader doesn't guess?
That is hard. That is, to me, that is the biggest challenge. And I think what I find I need to do is, when I'm writing and my first instinct is to do something, I need to stop myself, because that's the first instinct is often the cliche, right?
Yeah.
It's often like the first thing you think of is the thing that you think of because you've read it before. So I might have that idea and just put it aside and be like, what would be the thing that I wouldn't expect to read right here? And that's kind of it's so hard, because how many millions of books are published not millions of books every year, but thousands and thousands of books are published every year, and coming up with something original that you haven't read 100 times before is really hard. So there's a lot of guessing and second guessing, and then putting things aside, and then asking. I feel like there's almost this moment where I'm writing, and when I feel that moment of surprise, where I'm like, oh, I'm writing something and this came out that I didn't expect. That's when I know that I've got that aha moment. That's finally the book going in the direction it needs to go.
Oh, cool. And since it ties in with character arc, even if a reader guessed what happened, they might not necessarily guess why it happened or how it was going to happen.
Right.
So that way, it was so fun. See, everyone has to buy the book if they haven't yet, because you have to find out what happens at the end. And there's so many misunderstandings that drive this book, and we see a lot of the scenes from both characters' points of view, and they get it wrong like every time about the other person.
Thematically, that's one of the things I really like to explore in my books, is this idea of you see what you want to see in the people around you. There's often kind of a willful blindness in varying levels, where things that don't fit into your narrative, in the convenient narrative of your life that you've built, you often kind of blinker and choose not to see. And certainly that's a theme that runs through almost all of my books, but in this one, where we have con artists, it's even more prevalent than ever before. So.
And it's really fun watching what they do, because we as readers don't know what everybody's up to. There's certain things we know that the other characters don't know, and then there's certain things that we do not know as a reader which obviously it makes it much more fun that way. So yeah, I mean, we have these con artists, and then we have Vanessa, who is an Instagram influencer. So she's a con artist in that she has her own false identity, and she's putting this thing out there that is what she wants everyone to think her life is like, but really she feels shallow and empty. And but you have this interesting thing that you did, which I didn't really notice until I read it through a second time. But your characters address the reader, not the reader, but in the second person. Occasionally something will come through. So Vanessa will say, so yes, I like being a Liebling, wouldn't you? And then she says, so now do you feel sorry for me after all? And she says a few things like that. And like, who is she talking to? And then I'm like, oh, she's talking to her fans, to her Instagram fans who she can't see. But even when she's not on Instagram, that's all she can see is these invisible people who are her audience.
It's kind of the idea of, this kind of social media age. You always feel like you're on stage, you're always performing, or there's a performative aspect to everything in your life when you're taking pictures and you're captioning everything that you do all day long, and you're constantly thinking about your audience and these people who have millions of followers or hundreds of thousands of followers. How do you ever stop putting on a performance for them, right? So so I enjoyed having fun kind of breaking the wall there, and having her be addressing us as her.
That was kind of fun, because I was like looking around like, who's she talking to? Because it doesn't happen all the time. The book isn't written in second person, but like a handful of times throughout we get this, and it was fun having to figure out, like, I felt included in the book.
Thank you. I'm glad.
In that way. And then even Nina kind of pops in just once or twice with addressing the reader, but I think it's like she kind of falls into Vanessa's way of doing it. But Nina is posing as this woman, Ashley. So she has these two identities going at the same time. And it's really interesting because she's talking to herself in it. She's this split person, which was that was one of my favorite parts, was to read Nina trying to be Nina and Ashley at the same time. She's trying to con this woman, Vanessa, but her real self is behind there too, and her own feelings about her. So it was really interesting watching her go back and forth within the same scene, trying to hold both of those entities.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like so Nina, for those who haven't read the book, Nina, moves into a Vanessa's guest house under assumed identity, a fake identity. She pretends to be Ashley. Her boyfriend Lachlan moves in with her. He calls himself Michael, and they befriend Vanessa in order to kind of, with nefarious intentions of things that they want to get from her. And so, Nina's performing, and she's pretending to this character of Ashley. And I really enjoyed this idea of, when does the performance become part of her own longing of who she really is, right? So she's Nina, but she's not particularly fond of who she is as Nina. She's a criminal, and she knows it, and there's this kind of self-loathing. And so as she's performing this character of Ashley, she starts kind of falling in love with the character that she's playing and wanting to be this character that she's playing. And then you kind of get this split personality, is like she wants to be this person, but she's this bad person, but she's trying to be perform this good person. And it's a form of schizophrenia, which is, obviously another theme in the book as well. So
that's true. But I really like seeing it in Nina, just as she hugs Vanessa, and she's Nina hugging Vanessa. She's Ashley hugging Vanessa, and she's having completely different feelings about it as those two people. So, which brings me to, I had a very good time reading your article in Psychology Today, My Life as an Unlikable Woman, and which posed the question, where did it go? Best-selling literary suspense author channels unlikability into her characters. And you say, nice women make good friends. They do not make for terribly great stories. This is why my characters cheat, lie, and worry not a whit about what other people will think of them. We get to live consequence-free inside the head of a person who says and does all the things we are afraid to do and see. In a world where likes are the new currency of existence and your self-worth is tied up in the number of friends on your Facebook page, getting lost in an unlikable character feels like a vacation from all that second guessing and self-doubt.
Yes.
I would love to hear more about that.
Yes. Okay. So, I love books where you have characters that are complicated and difficult. Not necessarily the person that you're going to like sit and drink a cup of tea with and pet a cat with, but someone who is like a challenging, complicated person. But there's so much to them that is really interesting. And I feel like my goal as an author is always to try and take the difficult person, take the difficult woman, and get into her head and become empathetic for her and understanding of her, to know what makes her mind tick, and to give that to the reader, right? So they get these insights into these unusual people. Because for me, the best, most interesting stories are the people who do things that are wrong. Like, someone doing all the right things does not make a very good story. Someone doing the wrong things, that's where conflict is, where story is, right? And characters who have issues are ones who create conflict. So, which is, like I think you touched on at the end of that quote, like that's almost the inverse of the way we live our lives. We live our lives worrying about whether people like us or not, and worrying about likability, of whether it's clicking the like on an Instagram image, or wanting your friends to like you, what have you. So writing characters that are unlikable or who are difficult is this kind of freedom where you can just let go of all of that stuff that you're worrying about whether you yourself are likable, and can kind of channel yourself into all the unlikable aspects into this character.
Oh, well, I liked how you put it in that article.
Thank you.
And it's true. So Vanessa says in the book, when you're documenting everything that you do, you stop living life for yourself and start living it as a performance for others. And I just wondered if you want to reflect at all on social media in general and what's happening now. And I mean, we've all been, locked in our houses a lot of the time, and having to do social media or remote things even more than usual. And there's been so much going on in this time with protests and the news and everything. And we're viewing it through a lot of times through this social media lens. And so I wanted to kind of hear your thoughts on that, because you do write about that a lot in this book.
Yeah. I have very conflicted feelings about social media. And when I started this book, I was kind of writing it almost as an indictment of social media. Vanessa obviously is an Instagram influencer, and one of those people who just, all she does is dress up in expensive outfits and take pictures of herself that are very artificial, and uses that to like sell this image of herself and sell things to her hundreds of thousands of followers, and is all very artificial. And I have real problems with the kind of influencer culture that has grown out of Instagram, and where there's this kind of people famous for being nothing but pretty and taking good pictures of themselves, whatever it is. So that part of social media is a real issue for me, and that's why I wrote this book. But I also have to admit that I am kind of hooked on social media myself. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, I'm all the platforms. And there are parts of it that I really, really enjoy. And the community aspect of it for me is really important. I've connected with so many readers through Instagram in particular, but through all the social media platforms, and other authors. And especially in the last couple of months, I feel like I have come to appreciate it more than ever before, because it is the only way I'm connecting with the outer world right now, is through social media. So, I'm not going on a book tour. I didn't travel around the country and meet people face to face. I'm just doing things like this, Zoom events or YouTube
Mhm.
events, and then connecting with people who reach out to me on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook. So in that sense, like I'm like, okay, I'm kind of a fan, but only it's kind of like a great, it's like the devil and the angel, right? Like it's part of it is terrible, part of it's great. You have to find your great part and try and ignore the terrible part. But I don't know, like I have two children that are 8 and 10, and I worry a lot about how it will impact their self-image as they get online and start going into the world of social media. So
Mhm.
hopefully a couple of years.
Yeah. So have you been doing a lot of appearances for your book tour online? Has that been working? Because you must have had something set up that probably all got canceled, right?
Yeah, and
Because
so
your book just came out in April.
April 21st,
So
smack
right in the middle of it all.
right in the middle. I mean, a couple weeks earlier, my publishers were like, "Well, maybe should we cancel? If we push your book publication date back, like I don't know." And then we're like, we're going to be fine by the end of April. I think things will be back back to normal.
Little did we know.
But yeah, I had a whole book tour planned, and I did do some virtual events with some of the bookstores that I was planning to do events with in the first place, and they just pivoted and made them virtual instead of online. But some bookstores stopped doing them entirely. I've done I've done every platform known to man. I've done Instagram lives, I've done Facebook lives, I've done YouTubes, I've done Zooms, I've done recorded podcasts, recorded video. It's been interesting. It's been really interesting.
Mhm.
So many ways to connect with readers now, which is an upside. So.
And you probably have a lot of these events recorded, which you wouldn't have if they were live, right? So
Right,
those are kind of nice to have and be able to
sort of.
use again, maybe.
Every mistake you make is recorded.
That's true. Yeah. Well, I'm sure people aren't focusing on that. Let's see. I have so many questions. I know we have a lot of audience questions coming up too, so I will open it up for those in just a couple of minutes. Let's see. Well, a big question. Can you talk about, so for people who don't know, not only did Pretty Things just get published in April, but it was also, there was a, I don't know what you call it exactly. It was, it's going to be a TV series on Amazon.
Option to be
Optioned, okay.
Yes.
Well, it's more than option though, if they already have a lot of it in place, right?
Yes. Well, I mean, Hollywood is a very complicated place.
Yes.
But yeah, basically when you option a book, I'm currently writing a screenplay. Nicole Kidman's production company is the one that optioned it with Amazon, and we are developing it into a TV show, and she's going to play a role in it. So yeah, it's I wouldn't say it's a done deal, because nothing is ever a done deal with Hollywood until they call cut on the last scene and they're putting it on.
First, they have to be able to get people in one place together to.
I know, exactly. I mean, production's been shut down for the last couple of months, and God knows where things are going to be in the next 6 months to a year. But it looks very good. It's been very exciting. It's a great project, and it's a great team, and I'm really excited.
That's really exciting, because that's way beyond just a regular option that might or might not be picked up by somebody. So everyone's been asking me, is Nicole Kidman going to play the mom?
I'm not at liberty to say.
Okay.
That. I'm not sure how much secrecy
Okay. I had to ask anyway. But it should be. I'm very excited for that. And it sounds like there was a big bidding war for it too, which had to feel really good.
I had 9 offers, so it was.
Wow. And that was before the book was even published, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Has that happened with any of your other books? Or is this the first one?
Watch Me Disappear is in development right now.
Oh, wow.
I had a couple offers for that one, but nothing quite like this. So. And Watch Me Disappear is a TV series right now.
So you're going to be writing the screenplay, you said. Have you done that before? Have you written screenplays?
I have. I've actually written screenplays for a couple of my own books. But nothing's actually made it to the screen yet. Like I said, Watch Me Disappear is still in the works, but I adapted that. And I did a screenplay years ago of my first novel. And then I wrote a pilot at one point too. So I've done some screenwriting.
Oh, wow.
But it's a learning process every time.
Yeah, that's really exciting though. And you're executive producing too, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, because a lot of times the author just might get to visit the set for one day if they're lucky.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
and be consulted once or twice, but
yeah, I got the dream situation right now, so I'm very happy about that.
That's amazing. Just checking. Oh, we're right on schedule. This has never happened to me before. So I'm going to open it up to audience questions, which I have already been getting some in. Let me just open that up. Oh, okay. Okay. Are you ready for the audience questions, Janelle? Okay. First one. Why did you write the book?
Why did I write the book? Well, if you want to go all the way back to first grade, I felt compelled to become an author because I love telling stories. And God, that's a general question. It's hard to even know. I mean, I write in general because I feel compelled to write. And I love storytelling. I love reading. I love, I can't imagine my life without it. And there's this part of me whenever I hear a great idea or a great kind of little nugget of a story, it just starts growing in my mind. And I first thing I could think is, oh, this would make a great story. How would I tell this story? This one, I guess the why is why this story and this particular story. I've wanted to write something about con artists for a long time. I'm really fascinated by con artists and the kind of psychological manipulation that they are able to do. It's it's a confidence game, right? Where they prey on people's emotional weaknesses and use it against them, which it's fascinating to me psychologically. There's so much there. So I've wanted to write something about them for a long time. And then there was a story a couple years back of how, do you remember when Kim Kardashian was robbed by jewel thieves in her Paris, pension? She was staying in Paris. She had this kind of rental apartment, and one night these cops came to the door and then broke in. It turns out they were jewel thieves. They held her up at gunpoint and took off with her jewelry. The part of that story that was interesting to me was not really any of that part. The part that was interesting to me is the jewel thieves figured out where she was and what she had with her through her own Instagram posts. So they basically pieced it together where she was staying in France and in Paris through clues, and also what bling she was wearing in her photos. And so that was really fascinating to me. I was like, the social media age, right? Revealing all these details about ourselves. We have no idea who's watching us when we post things on social media. Like, why are they watching? Who are they? There's millions of people there. Like, what are they looking at? And so I kind of married those two ideas, the con artist and the invisible person on social media, and kind of came up with this idea of this Nina, this kind of young modern grifter who's using social media to target her prey and then using them to kind of get into their minds. So I guess that's the why of it. It just felt like there was so much there to explore, and I really loved the idea of getting into that world. So hopefully that's the why of it.
The next question is, where did you do most of the writing for Pretty Things? At home, outdoors, while traveling? I know that you like writing in cafes because your dad leaked that.
I do. He's right. So I have to move around a lot. I get antsy if I sit too long, but I usually find that, so first of all, I have an office that I go to, which is actually a communal writing space that I founded with some friends who were writers about 8 years ago. And we have a big group office. We all have desks, and we go in there and we kind of share this quiet space where we all can go write. And it's very inspiring to just be in a room with a bunch of other people and everyone's frantically typing away, and you feel less inclined to procrastinate and go shopping online. Is
it one big room?
Well, we have like 4 rooms, and we have I think 16 desks between 4 rooms. But I also like to write at cafes a lot. Often I'll start my morning at a cafe, like get up, go to a cafe, get some coffee, sit in this kind of space, get my head in the work. After 2 hours and I can't sit there anymore, then I go to my office and I write there for a long time. I don't write at home very much just because I like to get out of my house. Lately I've been having to write at home because I can't get out of my house. And then the other thing that I do, which is really where my best writing happens, is I go on writing retreats, and I will go rent a cabin somewhere with a friend who's a writer, and the three of us will just hole up for 4 or 5 days in a cabin, and I get so much writing done that way because you have nothing else to do. I don't have children who need lunches to be made, or I don't have dry cleaning to pick up, or there's no distractions. And so I can just write for like 12, 14 hours a day. And it's great.
Wow, you write that long.
When I go on a writing retreat, I will get up at 7 and I will still be writing at I will take breaks, but I'll still be writing well until bedtime, obviously, often.
That is amazing. Do you have to move around a lot in the middle though?
Yeah, I do. I move from couch to table and go. Sometimes I'll find a cafe wherever I'm staying and go write at a cafe for a while. I'll go for a run, then I'll come back and write some more. So,
but you really take it as the full time, well, more than full time. That sounds great. And you're there with other people. You're not by yourself. So it's
good to have other people around. Otherwise, you just go crazy. So we'll take a little breaks and have a glass of wine.
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
Oh. Let's see. Question. I understand that you are a 5th generation Californian. How has that heritage influenced your writing? This is from Kathleen.
That is a good question. I think it might be 7th generation, actually.
Not sure. Your dad said it was 5th. By the way, I do not know Janelle's dad, but I did get some crib notes from him, because he was very excited about this event.
Okay, I guess I was just, I'm
on both sides of the family, he said.
Both sides of the family, my mom and my dad, both of them have family members that go way, way back. I mean, we recently did a big kind of family history project for my kids' school, and we found letters that I want to say my great grandfather wrote when he came out to California as a missionary during the gold rush. He was not a missionary. He was starting a school for girls. He was a preacher. He was a priest, and he came out to start a religious school for girls out near. Oh my goodness, why am I blanking on the name of the town? It's kind of inland from Carmel. I'm blanking on that.
Monterey?
Inland from Monterey, yeah, inland though, like in the farm country. But so he came out during the gold rush, and that's one side of the family. The other side of the family also goes way back. But yeah, I feel very much a Californian, and I've never lived anywhere else, and other than a year abroad when I was in college. And I don't really feel compelled to. The California is such a rich country. It feels like a country.
It could be it someday.
There is so much variety here. I mean, we have the variety of topography. We have the variety of the kinds of cities in Southern California, Northern California. It's a city. It is a state that symbolizes so much to the world, and just what in its existence. It's the gold rush state. It's the state of fame, Hollywood. You have technology and the state of dreams and aspirations. And I feel like there's so much to mine there. And I find that every book that I've written, it feels like I can set it in a new part of California, and yet have it feel like a completely new subject to explore.
That school for girls sounds like an interesting subject.
Yeah, although I've never written a historical novel, but yeah, I was fascinated by that. And his letters were all about all the bugs and how bad it was. He was he was camping out. There was nothing here. So it was fascinating. He was writing letters to his daughter back east. So.
That's wonderful that you have those letters still, because I mean, with everything social media now, people don't really keep. I mean, there's certain things that get kept, but correspondence like real correspondence isn't really one of them.
It's gone the way of the dodo bird. It's very sad.
Yeah. I mean, I still have boxes of letters. I'll have to find them in my closet, but like I treasure those. And sometimes just for the mundane things in them, which you don't find in the social media. So,
Right.
Okay, the next question is from Elizabeth, unless I'm getting these wrong. So I'm curious if Janelle Brown was inspired by Wings of the Dove and writing Pretty Things, though clearly with its own trajectory. Loved the book.
You're not the first person to ask me that. And the answer is no. I haven't read the Wings. I read that book high school, I want to say, maybe early college. And I haven't read it since. And so my memory of it is fairly vague. Like someone asked me that question. I was like, oh God, no, I didn't, but I should go back and reread it because clearly it's got some parallels that I've forgotten about. So no.
Okay, the next question is from Raquel. Have you been writing during shelter in place? How has that experience been for you? And we talked a little bit about that. Do you have anything else you want to say about that?
It's been really interesting. So, I do have two children at home. My husband and I are both home, working from home right now. So there's this kind of chaos level that I'm not used to.
Yes.
I tend to need like a good long stretch of time to write because it takes me. When I sit down to write, I can't just sit down and immediately start writing. There's like a throat clearing process where it takes a while for me to get in and get into the headspace. And then once I'm in there, I want to write for a couple hours. So, I usually like to have a 5 or 6 hour stretch to work. So I don't have a whole lot of that right now because someone's always coming in the room and being like, oh, Mom, help me with my Zoom. Oh, Mom, I'm hungry, I need lunch, But it's been getting better. We've been getting more into routine and I have started writing again. I was actually working on some screenwriting at the beginning of the pandemic because it felt a little easier to do that in discrete chunks. But in the last kind of month and a half, I've started to get working on my new book. We've got
so you have a new one you're working on.
A new one, yes, a new one. So I've gotten a little bit better at like juggling and shutting doors, and my husband will be in charge for 4 hours and then I'll be in charge for 4 hours and get a little more work done. So,
well, if this goes on long enough, they'll be teenagers and then you won't ever see them. So you'll have plenty of time to yourself. That's what I have in my house.
Oh God. I mean, so we finally got into routine with school, right? And then school ended and now we're in summertime. I'm like, oh my God, and we'll just start all over again. So
yeah, well, it's impressive though. It sounds like you have been getting a lot done even with the kids being there. So
yeah, it's been getting better. It's been getting better. So
okay, next question from Katie. Do you have fond memories of visiting libraries as a kid?
Yes. And in fact, I used to volunteer at the Menlo Park Library when I was growing up. I was a total library. I loved my libraries, and I would go to the Atherton Library, but the Menlo Park Library was bigger, and they had a volunteer program there. And so I spent my childhood, like I must have been in like 7th grade, I want to say, when I started volunteering for the library, and I would just go hang out and like shelve books and work on the decimal card system, file, the
Dewey Decimal System, woohoo!
Like type out like the things, little stickers that went on, and I loved libraries, and I loved volunteering for the library because I could get first crack at all my favorite books. Back then it was like Lois Duncan and Stephen King, and I would go,
yeah,
I got it, come back, and I get it. So yeah, I am a big library person, and I live in Los Angeles now, and we're members of the library down there. I support the foundation, and I take my kids to the library like at least once a week when it's open. Now it's closed.
Mm-hmm.
We usually, I have a stack of about 30 books that I need to return to the library that we've been holding on to for the last 3 months.
Yeah, I have my stack like that too.
So yeah, I'm a big library booster, and they're such critical parts of our community, and I love supporting them. So support your local library, donate to your library, volunteer for your library.
Katie, I think Janelle just definitively answered your question. She is into libraries. So the next question is from Nicole. I feel like we haven't had such interesting anti-heroines since the heyday of noir. Why do you think there's an appetite for unlikable women today?
Ooh, that's a really good question. God, I mean, that's kind of like a big question about society at large and why we want them now. I think maybe we're kind of at this point in women's history where women have we've spent so long kind of trying to, in the last couple of decades, trying to have it all, right? Women are trying to do it all. They're trying to be perfect mom. They're trying to be, have a career. And there's been this kind of, I think, ideal that women were aspiring to for so long, where you're trying to like be everything, do everything. And this kind of idea of perfection as a parent and as a mother and as a woman has kind of, everyone kind of came to this point, I think maybe in the last 5 years or so, where it became realize that it's just completely undoable, right? You can't have it all. You can't do it all. You can't be this ideal creature. And so this kind of anti-heroine maybe has come out of it, where you have this character that isn't perfect and isn't trying to be perfect, and in some ways revels in their unlikability or their going against the grain. I don't know. That's a theory I've never really voiced before, but it's an interesting question, and I don't know that I have the answer. But it's true. Like noir, the early noir anti-heroines, the kind of the femme fatales of the noir era came out of a very much a social movement of the time. So what's creating this one now? I don't know. Someone should write it. Someone should write a PhD about that.
Let's see. Okay, the next question is, did you read suspense novels growing up and anticipate that you would someday be a suspense or mystery author? You already mentioned a couple of your favorites, Stephen King and Lois Duncan.
Right. Yeah, I did. I've always loved mysteries and suspense, but I never intended to write it. I love mysteries and suspense, but I also read everything. And I was also reading Ayn Rand back then too.
Sounds like you're reading everything in the library.
I'm reading Anna Karenina, and so when I first started writing books, my first 2 novels, All We Ever Wanted Was Everything, and This Is Where We Live, were much more domestic drama / social satire, like Jonathan Franzen-esque kind of books. And I really enjoyed writing those kinds of books, and I kind of thought that's what I was going to keep doing, even though I did love reading suspense novels, and I have always read them. I mean, I love like Tana French and Gillian Flynn and Megan Abbott, Sarah Waters. Read plenty of Harlan Coben, and so really my third book, Watch Me Disappear, was the first book that I wrote that was a suspense novel. And I didn't write it intending it to be a suspense novel. I wrote the book and I turned it in, and I had written half the book, and I showed my editor. She's like, "Oh, you're writing a mystery, a suspense." I'm like, I am? I thought I was just writing this another kind of like domestic drama that just happened to have this kind of dark, twisty storyline about a missing mom. And she's like, no, you're writing a mystery. I'm like, oh, okay. And I kind of leaned into it at that point and really embraced it. I was like, oh, you're right. And I'm having fun doing it. And then when I finished that novel, they asked me if I'd write another suspense novel. And so I did. I wrote Pretty Things. So I feel like I'm a suspense novelist, but I'm also other kinds of novelist too. And in each book, I think each book that I've written feels a little different from the one before. Pretty Things is a little different from Watch Me Disappear, which is very different from my first 2. So I hope my next book is also going to be a little different as well.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a title for your next one yet, or
I do not. I'm not even close to that. Titles are my very last thing. Come up with a title at the end. I'm usually not very good at titles, and so it's like pulling teeth. Takes a while to get there. So no.
Dana has a question for you. Do you think Nina really changed in the end of the book? And how about Vanessa? And of course, you can't give away the spoilers, but
I think that, yes, they both change. I think there is they both take these emotional journeys where they recognize something in themselves that they don't like and they want to change. They're both aspiring to be better versions of themselves by the end, and making choices to get there. But I also think that if you find a book where someone is the opposite of where they began, that it's very artificial, right? We don't change like that as human beings. Like, we're always still partly our own person, right? You can't go from being a mean person to being a kind person without the meanness still being there a little bit. The curmudgeon is always going to be a little curmudgeonly. The cynic is always going to be a little cynical. So yeah, they're still themselves, but even though they've taken this journey and they're maybe moving towards different versions of themselves.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good way to put it, because you're right. If they were completely different, it wouldn't be believable.
Right.
When I got to the end, I was like, yes, this kind of makes sense for these characters.
Right. Yeah. Good.
And it almost made me laugh, because there were certain things that didn't change at all, but they had shifted so that those small shifts really, I think, create a big change, which is probably like life.
That's life, right? Small shifts.
Yeah.
That's what we hope for. The small
Mm-hmm.
shifts that add up to the big change over time, right? Yeah.
Okay. Next question. Was there any point where you got stuck while you were writing the book, Pretty Things?
Yes.
That's also from Dana.
Yes, all the time. I get stuck all the time. Every book I've ever written, I've gotten stuck at, and there's often a point where I'm kind of in maybe the first third of the book, maybe even probably the first third of the book, where I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing, and I just can't write, and I get completely stuck. And there is weeks, sometimes even months go by when I just sit down. Every time I look at the computer, I want to throw it across the room. I have to get up and walk away. And then one day something happens and I have that like epiphany or that breakthrough, and then I sit down and then it all comes pouring out again. But yeah, I get stuck. Every writer I know gets stuck. We all get stuck. So.
But hopefully you haven't actually thrown your computer across the room.
No, it's not. You think about it. But no.
Okay, let's see. When Nina attended the school in Tahoe, it was exciting to see her character evolve in a positive direction. Did your high school experience inform this part of the book? This is from Gudrun.
Ooh, that's an interesting question. Yeah, I mean, my high school experience was 30 years ago, so it's kind of I had I feel like my experience at high school, I know, everyone feels like an outsider in high school, right? That's kind of the classic story. But I was kind of a little bit of an edgy, alterna girl, and I certainly channeled some of that into Nina and her kind of feeling like a little bit like a loner and a misfit at her school. And then she meets Benny, and who's her first high school boyfriend. And that's this real kind of like wonderful emotional journey for her, and this kind of linchpin of her life, where life could go this way, but then something happens and it goes that way instead. I wouldn't say I had that kind of experience in high school, where I didn't have some kind of first love like that. I would have loved to at the time. That was kind of what I dreamed of, but I didn't have that in high school. I never had a Benny.
I did. A bunny?
A Benny.
A Benny.
I didn't have a bunny either, but my sister had a bunny. I did not have a bunny.
There's one more question here, then I have another question for you, and then we're almost at the end of our time. What is your favorite Stephen King novel? This is from Annie.
Oh God, that's a hard one. I have a thing for The Stand. Which I love an apocalyptic novel. I really do. And I read The Stand a couple times over the course of my life. I love a lot of his books. I also loved the JFK novel, which the date I always get wrong. 6/22/64, 5/22/64, whatever it was. The one where he goes back in time to JFK's assassination.
Yeah, I don't know what the name.
Out the name of that one. That's a great novel too. But yeah, The Stand, for some reason, just like I've always loved loved that kind of big sprawling world and good versus evil and the apocalypse is here and all that kind of stuff. So
okay, so I just wanted to ask one quick question. We talked a little bit about Lachlan, who's the boyfriend, who's in on the con. He was a really good character because he charmed everybody, and of course probably has his own agenda along the way. And then there's Lily, who is Nina's mom, and she's the other character in the book. Did you want to say anything about them?
Yes.
They were fun to read.
I love those characters. In a way, like I almost feel like each of those characters is their own book.
They could be. I know. I could totally see. There's stuff we don't know about them that I would love to know.
So often the secondary characters are the most fun to write because there's a freedom in them that because you're not spending so much time with them, I don't know how to describe it. I always feel a freedom when I'm writing the secondary characters. And Lachlan and Lily were so rich and complicated and fun and like manipulative and had so many secrets that in a way, they're kind of driving the book, even though the characters of Nina and Vanessa are obviously the main characters and are the engines of the story. Lily and Lachlan are the characters kind of pulling the strings that we don't see. And so I loved kind of writing them and drawing them out as characters. So
I figured that because you seem like you're having a lot of fun with them. There's a richness to them, and they're not narrating the book like you said, but that was really fun. So it's already time to tie this up. This hour went so quickly. So I just want to thank you so much for this, Janelle.
Thank you. And thank you for coming. And thank you to the San Mateo County Library System for inviting me. I'm so honored to have been invited to do this. And I love being able to communicate with everyone in the Bay Area and all the library lovers and my dad for
and your dad
for the questions to you. This was fantastic, and I'm so honored to have been invited. I loved talking to you, Lisa.
It was great talking to you too. And I just wanted to remind people that if you haven't ordered the book yet and you haven't read it yet, you can order. I think there's going to be something on the screen, I'm hoping, where in the invitation to this, where you found out about the event, it's there as well. But when you order the book from Florey's bookstore through the link on the library site, this is a fundraiser, and the funds will go to Florey's and to the San Mateo County Library System. So you'll be supporting books in many different forms.
Yeah, supporting libraries and supporting independent bookstores, which doesn't get better than that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It was so great talking to Janelle, though, and thank you everyone who came to listen tonight. And I think, I'm not sure if something's going to be able to pop up on the screen. Let's see.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, here it comes. Excellent. Okay. So yeah, if you go to that link, then you should be able to, I can't actually see what we're looking at, but thank you so much to everyone who helped set this up. And the link is in the video description, I'm being told. Okay, good. All right, excellent. Well, thank you and have a good night, everybody.
Good night. Thanks, everybody.
And happy writing, Janelle.
Thank you so much. All right, take care. Bye.
You too. Good night.
Good night.